Hey, Tatiana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is really cool.
I'm really excited to have you on. You have such a wealth of experience in the global talent development world and working in such a global role. I always get excited talking with people in a role like yours because you have a good view into a lot of the different trends and things that are happening in talent development, cultural differences that come up with people working in different countries and different locations, different places. And I'm excited to talk with you about how the world of work is changing, how sort of the relationship between companies and employees is changing, because we're seeing a lot of things change uh,
Mm.
as we go here in 2026 and beyond. But before we get into that, I always love to know, how did you get started? How did you get into talent development in the first place?
I haven't really been a talent development person all of my career. Although I think if you do other things in the HR landscape and you're not doing good talent work, you're probably also not doing a great job in doing all these other things. So I've been in the field of human resources or human capital for over 20 years. And I've done all of my career going back and forth between business facing roles and talent and development roles. Although I would say, even when you're doing business facing roles, you are doing talent and development roles as well. And the back and forth has been very helpful to me to get a sense of what does it take to really great process design for talent, and how does it take to do that at an enterprise level? How can you think about it, how to do it holistically and make it feasible for other people to do it, and then seeing it work in the trenches, which is a different experience. So I've been really lucky to be able to go back and forth, both business facing and talent, and seeing how it works from both ends.
Yeah, and that's something that is, you could almost say, missing for a lot of people in talent development, very passionate about the people, but maybe not as much experience on the business side. Can you talk about how that business experience or working in the business has been really helpful to you in working in and leading talent development?
Oh, it makes the whole difference, I think. And not to say that if you have not done business facing HR roles, you cannot develop business edge. I think that's not true. You can absolutely get a good understanding of how the business operates. But that good understanding, it's so critical. It's very easy to sit across a conversation with a business leader and have them BS the whole way through that conversation. If you don't actually understand what the jobs are, what does it take to get it done, what does it take to make a leader successful, like if you understand the bloodstream of the company you work for, and how do we actually make money, how do we make results, how do we create shareholder returns, then creating much better understanding of what does the talent actually need to deliver against, and what are the conditions and environments for them to grow here, it's a completely different conversation.
You mentioned there sitting across from a business leader who is potentially BSing their way through a conversation. You mentioned, like, what's an example of that? Why would they not be speaking more frankly with you about what's happening, and what are you trying to figure out in that situation?
We're all humans. We all have a different perspective on different situations, and some bias and partiality onto how we interpret why things are going on at the way that they're going on. So the example that comes to mind more often to me is when you're sitting like through a calibration session, or you're like doing performance reviews, and you're trying to get to a collective point of view about what an individual is capable of or what they have delivered. Different line managers around the table are going to have different points of view. And if you don't understand what the work was, how much was delivered, the business impact of it, you can't possibly facilitate that conversation in the most impactful way. Of course, you can facilitate the meeting. You can still say, it's this person's turn, it's this person's turn. We're not hearing this person's opinion. We're not giving respect to the voice of this person. You can still facilitate a very effective meeting, but you're not going to be able to intervene on the actual business conversation that's in the room, or sometimes not happening in the room.
Mm. So that's a good segue into one of the most important topics I want to ask you about, which is how the world of work is changing. We all know that things are changing in how work is done, how talent is managed and developed. And when you and I talked a few weeks back, you said something to me about employers needing to think differently about the contract, or the quote
Mhm.
contract, implied contract between employees and employers in 2026. How has that changed, and why is that a focus point for you?
I think there are changes that have been going on for a long time. So there's generations previous to ours that expected to work in the same place the whole of their careers, that has been gradually changing over time. You talk to a lot of people in my, let's call it age band, that actually have 2 or 3 long-term employment terms, different companies. That's becoming more and more common. And then when you look at the research on generations that are now just entering the workforce, what people say they want is that if there's no progression, there's no growth, I'm going to change very quickly. And you see more and more people changing jobs every 2, 3, 5 years, and not just roles. I mean, actually changing employers more often. That denotes to me a little bit of being that they're more uncompromising about what they expect to see from an employer, more willing to take risks in terms of jumping from one thing to the other until they find what they really need. That said, when I first graduated school, I didn't say I'm going to stay with this company for 20 years. I thought I was also only going to stay for 5 years.
Yeah.
But what the company's done well is actually keep meeting what I needed at different stages of my career and re-upping to some extent my social contract with what could I expect as an employee and as a leader who's growing, right? And I think even for younger generations, that's what we're going to have to do. Continue to listen and respond to different career moments, different needs, different growth opportunities, so people can re-up their contract if it's really giving to them what they need. But more recently, I think there is the degree of change that's happening in the world is also making, in my opinion, people want to recenter on clarity and transparency. I want to know where AI is being used. I want to know how my assessment is being done. I want to know when I'm talking to a human. I want to know when I'm talking to an agent. I want the people just, I think, want to and deserve to know what the rules of the game are. And because the games are changing faster now, there is this constant need to keep recontracting. I think that's a little bit my read on a little bit of the push and pull that's happening now. With the amount of uncertainty that's out there, I think people want to know in their employment relationships, what are the rules of the game that we're playing right now? And can we be transparent about every time if there's a change? So I can re-up or not. And if this still meets my values, my needs, I can shake hands with you again and say, that's a social contract I can get on board with. But if it doesn't, I deserve to know and make a different decision.
Right. Yeah. You know that one of the things that I'm most passionate about in this space is career development and helping people think about how to grow in their careers. And in my research, the last study I saw from McKinsey showed that the number one reason people leave employers now is a lack of perceived career growth. And essentially the number one thing people want to know coming into a company, and everybody's different, but in general is, how am I going to grow in my career? And so are you giving them different opportunities, different ways to grow in their careers? And growth might look different for different people, right? It's not always a promotion. It could be taking on different types of projects or roles. But the key is it clear? Do they understand how they could potentially grow? Or is it a black box where people eventually get frustrated, then start taking that call from a recruiter or searching on LinkedIn and finding out what else is out there?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I'm saying as an employer, that the rules here are and how you can grow your career and what's actually happening, does it feel like it's coherent, the same? So if I'm saying, here's a talent marketplace, here's where you're going to find opportunities, here's what's important, skills are important, competencies are important, 360 feedback, whatever I'm saying is important, does it match the lived reality that employees are experiencing? And are they clear what belongs to them as an employee and what belongs to their line manager, to HR's responsibilities? Every company will be different in terms of what degree of responsibility is placed on whom. But is it clear to the person what is their responsibility as an employee to go after in terms of learning new skills, developing their competencies, seeking feedback, and does it match their lived experience?
Right. Yeah, I was looking at I was I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I said you've been with your current company for, I think, 24 years or something like that, which is uncommon these days, right? But you haven't been in one role. You've had several different roles while you've been there. So I would imagine that's one of the keys, at least for a large organization, to keeping employees longer, is offering them the opportunity to learn and grow and do different things and not just be stuck in, quote unquote, stuck in one role.
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely a big part of how this 20 something years went by and I didn't even feel it. there was never a moment that I feel I was learning something new, exposed to different things, and really expanding my capabilities. And like at some points, it was really, really challenging. But that's a part of what was important in my contract. That's what I wanted. I was in many times of my life willing to the extra stress and leaning in and saying, I'm going to figure this out. It's going to be tough. Or like we were talking before, like I'm going to travel a little bit more. But that was a part of what I needed to stay, to keep re-engaging.
Yeah. What was I going to say there? And so one of the keys there is that you do have these different options and different opportunities to grow and to different things. I'm seeing and hearing now a lot of organizations telling me that one of their goals is to increase career mobility, talent mobility, people taking on different roles, moving around.
Mhm.
And there's three important pillars, I think, to that. One is the organization provides the tools and the pathways, that marketplace that you mentioned potentially. Another is that the leaders them are coaching and guidance and providing coaching and guidance and giving people opportunities. And the third is the employees themselves taking ownership of their careers and actually taking advantage of these opportunities. And where I see a lot of organizations struggling is getting leaders on board with this concept where they're supporting people in moving and doing different things versus trying to hoard that talent. So I'm curious, how have you thought about encouraging leaders to being more open to supporting talent mobility versus trying to keep employees as long as possible?
Yeah, that's always a tricky one because everybody wants to hold on the best people they have because it
Mm-hmm.
helps on their delivery and therefore it helps on their career in some ways and in their performance, right? I think there's a couple of things that make a big difference. One is there a clear set of expectations about what the leader's behavior should be? What gets recognized, what gets reinforced is usually what moves the needle. And if leaders are told very clearly, I expect you to help grow your people, because that stuff shows up, right? It shows up in engagement surveys, it show up in 360 feedback. It can show up in so many different ways if people are actually not feeling that their line manager is really supporting, giving feedback, their career growth, and all of that. It just shows up. At the end of the day, I always tell people I work with, just remember people can always vote with their feet. If they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
stay working with you, they will not. Whether you let them move internally or not, they will vote with your feet. So you lose them. It's whether you're going to lose them and keep them in the company or just going to lose them, period. It's the two potential endings to that story when they're ready to move and they're ready to grow.
Right.
I think the other thing that tends to have a good impact is for some of the people I work with is to remind them at some point somebody reach out a hand to them, right? It's because somebody didn't hoard them
Yeah.
and you keep them in the same job forever that they got to where they got. Is it really fair that they expect the people underneath them never to get the same level of like support and help?
Right. Yeah, I've thought about that. I think I've said that in leadership workshops that I've run. Like, imagine that your manager is holding you back. How would
Yeah,
you feel about that? Of course, you'd be frustrated, right? So why would you do that to other people? It's selfish,
yeah,
right? It's short-sighted. And the more you can empower and enable them to succeed long term,
yeah,
the more it's going to build your legacy as a great leader and attract more great talent.
yeah. I do think in a very opposite direction as well. There is sometimes unreasonable expectations of how quickly people really learned and juiced everything there is to juice from a job.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a couple of runs around the track, right? And the first run around the track, you figure out what's the lay of the land, what's the shape of this track, how fast can I go, and in the second run, you typically will perform better because you actually know
Mhm.
the lay of the land, and maybe say, well, do I really want to do a third run around this track, or do I really am I ready to go run a different track? And
Mhm.
of course, depending on where you are in your career, some tracks are harder to master and some tracks are easier perhaps
Yeah.
earlier on. So that timeline, it doesn't have to be like 1 year is one round, 1 year, the second year is your second round around the track. It depends really on what type of job you have and what's the planning horizon, what's the impact horizon.
Right.
But I do think it's important that you take one run around to learn and one run around to then pay back the learnings that you got.
Yeah, you may be eager to move on, you might not be ready, and it's important to have that feedback from a manager as well, as long as they're coming from a place of genuinely caring about you, that like, "Hey, I don't think you're ready for this yet. You need some more experience."
Yeah.
And then people get to make their own decisions.
And these are the things you're yet to learn, right? If you stay in this
Yeah,
job, by the way, these are all the things you're still going to learn and get better at. So there's
right.
more to be gained here. I think that's also
Yep.
part of the conversation.
Yeah, completely agree. Tatiana, with AI changing everything as we're seeing on a daily, weekly basis, and jobs changing all the time, how do you think careers are going to be reshaped, especially with regards to recent graduates, to those early or entry level careers, and a lot of the knowledge work careers that we've been familiar with for years that are being changed now because of AI?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what's going on. And I actually we talked a little bit about this before. I really worry about the current dynamics that the people who are graduating now face, because the technologies change more quickly than our preparation systems were able to catch up. Not
Hmm.
that I think before this current age we came out of university perfectly prepared for the world. I don't think we ever did come perfectly prepared for the world of work. But I think the speed of how the skills are changing and how works get done change, it just made that gap a little bit bigger in the present moment. And then, of course,
Hmm.
depending on where you are on the pessimistic to optimistic spectrum, that gap could actually close quite quickly later on, or it could keep getting bigger and bigger. I do worry a lot about whether the people coming out of university today know enough about the use of the technology, how it gets built, how it can be used for good, how it can be used for bad, and be able to actually incorporate that in the jobs. But I am seeing some of the jobs in the more entry level, more of the jobs we used to actually groom people. I
Mm.
see, I think across my peers in the industry, when we talk, we see some of them collapsing. And I think we need to now rethink, when you come out of school, what are you prepared to do? Because in another hand, you can be very optimistic and say you also can learn much quicker with the technology that's
Hmm.
available, right? You can close whatever gap is caused so much quicker with all the resources that are available with the support of AI as well. So I think we need to
Right.
figure out, flip the question a little bit, and how do we actually prepare people who are graduating for different types of jobs and use all of the
Mhm.
tools to close the gap faster? Because I do see a gap being created now as people come out of school.
Yeah. How are you seeing hiring changing now when organizational leaders might say, "Hey, I don't think we need to hire as many, graduates for this work because we can get AI to do a lot of the tasks." But then, like to your point, we're not really grooming them to get to those mid-level positions where they would be overseeing that work. And so then do we not have enough qualified people later? And so I'm seeing a lot of like push and pull in the
Yep.
marketplace now from how companies are hiring.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important dilemma we're going to be faced with over the next couple of years. And the only way I see forward as bridging that dilemma is to then think about the job that would normally be a second or third job for that recent grad. Is it more doable now for somebody who's graduating, given that there's so much more sophisticated tools at the disposal of that recent grad, right? There
Mhm.
would have been jobs before that would say, oh, you need at least 5 years of experience to do this job. And maybe that's not true anymore. So we need to have push the thinking also further up the food chain in the organizations, so we actually open other types of opportunities for people who are graduating. Because the reality is we're still going to need workforce, and if you're still going to need a workforce, what is the right way to actually groom that workforce? If it's not the early grad job of yesterday, what is the early grad job of tomorrow then?
Mhm. Yeah. Is there a way that you think about codifying like how you look at hiring now or how this is changing and when people should be using AI versus hiring, or is that something that's still a work in progress?
I think it will be a work in progress for a while now, because it's
Mhm.
this stuff is not only new, but there's still a little bit of a gap between what we think it can do, what it does do in reality. There's a gap in our ability to actually use it to the max that, I think all of us need to get more
Mhm.
and more versed in. And of course, when you get versed, it's already changed and it got even better and it's more evolved. So I don't think this is going to be, it's going to be more of a journey type resolution than we just do this educational program and do this hiring program and bam, we close the gap and now
Right.
we know what we're hiring for. This
Yep.
is unfortunately, I think, one of those areas in life where the bar is going to keep moving.
Mhm.
And at least for the foreseeable future, I think the bar on technology use is going to keep moving, and therefore the bar on what the real jobs are like are going to keep moving. But it should not, hopefully, it won't be undoable as we keep bridging the gap between where the frontier of the jobs are, but also what's available for people to really upskill themselves. It keeps moving at the same speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Tatiana, many companies are looking at revamping performance management. I've seen this conversation come up again and again with talent leaders over the last, I don't know, 10 years. I mean, this has sort of been ongoing, right?
Yeah.
How have you approached this in the past, and what do you think needs to be considered if you're looking at revamping talent management? I know this is something you mentioned to me that you had worked on last time we spoke, and so I know you have a lot of experience here.
I've worked on it a few times because, as you said, this is one of those that comes around. It goes around, and then it
Mhm.
comes around, and then it goes around and comes around again. I think the best discussions I had around performance management are very deliberate about what is the cultural we're trying to create, what's the cultural shift you're really trying to create. Does it tie nicely to what you're doing in performance management? Because that is such a strong signal.
Mhm.
It's one of those moments that whatever you say, you recognize it's important. It's the icon of what it means to be successful in this particular place. And as such, nothing will give stronger signals to the culture than what you do in performance management. So thinking about that very deliberately, I think, is super critical. And it's not just that, and I am being a little partial here as a talent person. It's not just performance management. Talent management also matters tremendously because one really strong signal is who do you signify to the organization are your top performers, but also who do you promote is such a visible signal. And that's not just performance management, it's also talent management. Who is ready to take that new job? Who is ready to be your business unit leader? Who is ready to go on that international assignment? Those are all signals to the organization about what does a great leader and a successful professional in this company look like. And if you're not deliberate about it, that's the model you're replicating, whether you know it or not. So to me, performance management, talent management, who you promote, who you recognize are actually important culture setters that you have to really, really deeply, deeply reflect on. And they're full of
Mhm.
unintended consequences. I'm yet to see any perfect performance management. We had ratings, then we didn't have ratings. Now we have ratings
Right.
again. We had
Yeah.
9 box, then we didn't have 9 box. And now I talked to a bunch of people, they're bringing a 9 box back. Some people are bringing a
Yeah.
4 box back. And the reality is, you can change it as many times as you want.
Yeah.
What you're looking for is a shorthand on actually how to identify your best people, the people who deserve disproportionate reward, who deserve disproportionate recognition. The bigger the company, the more shorthand you need because you're trying to manage a pretty decent size workforce. If you're managing 100 people, you know all of them by name, you know exactly what they delivered, you know exactly what their goals are. 1,000 gets harder, 10,000 gets harder, 100,000 gets harder. And none of
Mhm.
the systems are perfect. You just have to understand what are the unintended consequences about the system I have just chosen. Some of them will be super high maintenance, very tough to do, incredibly amounts of effort. Some of them will be low effort, but therefore also high subjectivity, and that creates different types of consequences. You just have to be really aware of the culture you're creating and what unintended consequences you're going to have to work against.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too. You said in there, and I think you already explained some of it, but that your performance management or talent management setup is the biggest influencer on culture. I wonder if you can explain that a little bit more, because that's something I haven't really heard before.
Yeah, I do believe that to be true. So if you think about what type of risk-taking behavior you're trying to encourage and how you set your goals. So if I tell people uh, your goals are going to be set in a way that's really stretching, and I really want you to take risks. I want to go for bold, or like you think about the methodology or big, hairy goals, any of those, I think more recent, last 10 years type of goal setting methodology. Moonshots. You're really telling people, go for the moon. If you don't get to the moon, but you get halfway to the moon, you're better off than if you just shot to go to Europe.
Right.
I want you to shoot to go to the moon, right?
Yeah.
But then when people don't get to the moon and they get halfway to the moon, what you do matters, right? You told them,
Mhm.
be bold. I want you to be sure you're shooting for the moon. It doesn't matter if you don't get there. Will it not really matter if they don't get there? So what happens if somebody goes 90% of the way to the moon? Is
Yeah.
this a good result? Right? So how you interplay ambitious goal setting, clarity of goal setting. Do you want people to be realistic or really ambitious? Those things make a difference.
Mm.
And what do you do with the
Yeah.
outcomes makes a huge difference. So if I tell you, I want you to go for the moon, and I don't care if you reach 90%. But then when you reach 90%, you get punished on the outcomes of your
Hmm.
performance review. Will next year you say, I'm going to do it again? Or not? Right? You're going to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to tell you I'm going to go 50% of the way and touch and go back. Right?
Yeah.
These things make a huge difference. And it's
Yeah.
not that the systems are right or wrong. You just have to be really conscious that the thing is articulated in a way that is coherent so people understand. Am I being realistic? Or am I or moonshots? What do you really want from me? And is
Yeah.
it coherent the way it's being set and the way it's being assessed at the back end?
Yeah. It depends a lot on the situation and the goals and everything. I think NASA is working on a new moon mission right now, and people would probably be disappointed if we only got 90% of the way there.
Sadly, on
But
NASA's
for
case,
the
because it's not a metaphor, either you got there or you didn't. But
right, exactly. But for most projects, and I've worked with a lot of organizations on this as well, you want to create the psychological safety and that growth mindset where people are willing to take risks and try things. But if you tell them like, oh yeah, we want to take risks, we want to innovate, but then someone tries something and fails and it costs the company money and they get punished, then
yeah,
they're not going to experiment. They're not going to be
yeah,
trying things again.
exactly. And subjectivity is another one of these things, right? It's very hard to say, I'm going to create a subjectivity free performance management process because there are context elements, behavioral elements, leadership elements. So, depending on what you're including there, it's going to be more or less subjective. But even in goal setting, even if it's numeric, I want to sell this many units of this thing in this market.
Mhm.
There's some subjectivity to it. A new competitor came in, or the economy didn't go grow as much as we thought we would. Is that a contextual element that this company in particular is willing to consider? And if it is, you're introducing subjectivity on the process, which can be good because it allows people to feel a little bit of a sense of security that your contextual elements will be considered. But it sometimes makes it harder because different human beings will use subjectivity in a different way, right?
Mm.
So again, unintended consequences. How subjective is it? And can you create
Yeah.
a shared framework of how subjectivity is or is not used
Mm.
in your process to give people comfort that we know that there's contextual elements without messing up your process entirely.
Yeah. Let's talk about data because this can definitely influence how you approach performance management and talent development programs, things like that. How do you think about using data in talent development and developing more of a data driven mindset?
Yeah, I think to me both performance management and talent management are joint art and science. The better you do the science part, which is collect the right data, the better is the discussion part, which is where it's the art part lives. So I think that the data foundation to it is super critical. Goals, numbers, what does the market do? What are the right comparators? Do we have actually data on this person as a leader? Do we have 360s? Do we have assessments of potential? Do we have cognitive assessments? Whatever it is that you actually want to build in that is important to your company, to your organization, and to this moment of your trajectory, that gives you a full holistic view of that human, what they bring to the table, what's already in their tool set, and it's already coming to fruition. There's a difference between what I'm capable of doing as a professional and what is showing up, right? And the more data you have, the more you can understand first if there's a delta between what I'm capable and what's showing up, what contextually is actually getting in my way, and how I can be helped to
Mhm.
be more impactful, to perform better, and also to level set, because again, I will come with some sort of subjectivity when it comes to my direct reports and you come with your sort of subjectivity. So if the data layer is comparable, and that allows us to have a common language conversation about your people, my people, and therefore be more clear about what is the layer of subjectivity that each one of us is putting on the table, and get to a common view on who
Mm.
are the best people, what help do they need, how do we help them grow, what's the best opportunity that lies ahead of them. So I think art and science are equally important here.
Yeah. How do you think about getting started with data if you haven't done that much with it, but you know that it exists at least somewhere in your organization because you've been doing surveys and collecting information about employees and things like that?
Yeah, you have to, I think, figure out a little bit of what is it that is already out there and how you make it better connected. and then go after pieces that are important that are missing. But back to the point on culture, it's a little bit of what philosophy and what culture you're trying to create. So if you work in an
Mhm.
organization where you want to say leadership and performance are equally important, you want to be measuring both things. Otherwise, it's just empty words, right? So
Mhm.
what's your chosen measure of somebody's leadership impact? Is it your engagement survey? Is 360? Is it an assessment? Is it a little bit of all of them? And therefore you need a little bit more sophistication and also the performance data. So I think you need a philosophical point of view first on what matters in this particular organization, and then make sure you're
Mhm.
actually looking at distinct data points that support that philosophy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned leadership in there being an important part. We talked a little bit about leadership earlier and helping leaders, persuading leaders to be more supportive of people growing in their careers. How do you think about leadership development in this modern time? Because this is something that almost every organization is investing in as well, realizing that culture is generally translated by the leaders, strategies generally translated by that middle management layer. So how do you think about leadership
Yeah.
development today?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question. Somebody said something to me the other day, and I can't remember where I heard it, but it's been, one of those things that you keep like machinating and
Mhm.
ruminating in your head. It was something around coaching being the new learning or the new training.
Mm.
I don't remember the exact words now. And I've been playing with that idea a little bit in my head because I remember I've been, as we said, I've been around for 20 something years. So I've been around long enough to remember as we move from 5-day learnings to a lot of online pre-work, then 2-day learnings and hybrid models of learning. And then we got into micro learning. So whatever was those 2 days got split apart and pulverized, and God knows how many short format videos. And and then there was a little bit of a counter movement that leadership development still needs those 2 days face to face because you need some real behavioral change and you need to test that out and practice in a safe environment. And then what's interesting that pushback that some stuff is still better done face to face and that practice had a lot to do with the opportunity to coach somebody to do some role play, to really experiment with behavior change in a safe way. So I think one of the most important things that are happening with the world now in terms of leadership development is the democratization of coaching.
Mm.
There's formats of that. So it used to be the thing that you only gave your most senior people or your most salient headaches in an organization. Now it's actually much more prevalent, whether it is human coaching that is done virtually or whether it's AI coaching that I think there's quite a good set of companies and solutions out there now, which means a lot more people can get access to that very safe. I'm going to experiment with this. I need help with this particular behavioral or this particular leadership skill. Can you please push me and help me and practice on a safe environment? So I'm actually really optimistic about what the technology can do in the leadership development space, especially if you go back to the art and science
Mhm.
thought and then mix those two things. Um, I think in that same conversation, somebody was telling me that now the learning piece gets done ahead of time. Here's a e-learning, a simulation, work with your AI coach, you do the learning ahead of time, and you just come together to actually build the connections that are needed for that learning to come to fruition. So
Mhm.
I think positive change that can really happen on this leadership development space.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And coaching such a big factor, whether it's from outside providers or especially getting your leaders to do more coaching, which is like the true way to get coaching at scale, right? Especially within the context of the organization, but also them providing more development and more opportunities for people. Because going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, the number one thing people want to know is how can I grow in my career? And their leader is going to be the main person who's going to bring that to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People are, these questions are so complicated. Like the
Yeah.
question of what are you capable of doing in your career? What it would take to get you there? How much effort do you need to put in? How much effort do I need to put in to help you? These are not simple questions, but that level of clarity is what people want and deserve.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Tatiana, this has been wonderful. Is there anything else that you've done or lessons learned that you think would be important for others in talent development to know about? Because of course, we're all about sharing lessons and best practices on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the role that I was doing before this, because I was doing one of these business facing roles that I've done, and I had this business unit that I was responsible for. And I remember, I think I was probably in the role for maybe 3 or 4 months. And my CEO kept calling me, and we keep having these business discussions, what's happening in this business, what's happening in that part of the business. And it dawned on me at that point in time. And maybe you can say I was a little slow and it dawned on me a little too late. But it dawned on me, behind every single business problem, there's either a talent problem or a talent opportunity.
Mm.
If there's a business opportunity, there's a talent discussion to be had. There's a business problem, there's a talent discussion to be had. And I kept being like, why am I getting this many calls? Is because there were business problems, there were business opportunities, and therefore
Mm.
everything is talent. And I don't mean necessarily the quality of the person, right? Holistically speaking, is the person, is their leadership capability, is the right skills, is the right organization design, is the right ways of working, is the right level of clarity, all of that. There's a human system that sits with every single business system that needs to be integrated, look at it holistically. And therefore, I think this is a little self congratulating, but I think we do some of the most important jobs in the company, because
Mhm.
if the talent system and the human system isn't right, at least with the technology there is today, nothing will be successful.
Yeah.
Maybe I will eat my words in the near future. But right now, even with the augmentation of technology, the human system is critical for success, and therefore,
Mhm.
who you place at what job with what level of support or what level of capability makes the whole of the difference. So
Yeah.
talent becomes this like integration point for every company, which goes back to the beginning of our conversation of the importance of understanding the business. If you're going to sit on that very core of the integration point for that business unit or for that company,
Mhm.
you need to understand what it is, the different points that you're trying to integrate. You can't be an island, right? And it's also an
Yeah.
integration point because it's a whole end-to-end life cycle. So I personally do talent management and leadership development, but the other aspect of it is who you hire, which
Mhm.
I'll be doing directly at this point in time, but it's equally important to the talent ecosystem. Who you let go is equally important to
Yeah.
the talent ecosystem, right? How do you pay people and who do you pay more? All of that. So talent sits at this very center of business delivery, business
Mhm.
diagnosis, and culture as well. So just saying, it's a really important job.
Yeah, completely agree. Talent still makes everything work in our business. Even when AI is involved, you
Yeah,
still have talent overseeing that and setting the strategy and making things work. One day we may all be working for the robots, but for at least
maybe.
for
Yeah.
now, people are
I
still
have
driving everything.
I have some positive expectations from the robots from an augmentation perspective. So I think about
Yeah.
how the robots can help me do my job better. If
Yeah.
I think about the amount of talent I'm trying to gain visibility to, and how
Yep.
intelligent I'm trying to get about who should go where and what matches make sense and what matches don't make
Mhm.
sense. Like I actually have a lot of hope that from an augmentation perspective just can make me a lot better at my job, but we're
Yeah.
still kind of like early on trying to figure out how that would work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm optimistic about the future as well. And Tatiana, this has been really great, really helpful. I appreciate you coming on to share so much of your experience and your wisdom and your perspective on talent development. I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and talking more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.